This video is dedicated to the legacy of Fran Tarkenton. As a matter of fact, I didn't know that Fran Tarkenton was actually a quarterback at the University of Georgia. He was drafted in the 3rd round for the Minnesota Vikings, but most of us know Fran Tarkenton as a business executive and as somewhat of a guru in the network marketing industry. He serves as definitely a liaison / mentor to a lot of more of the successful network marketers and motivational speakers in the world, such as Tony Robbins, Les Brown, guys of that nature. Matter of fact, I know a guy personally who knows Fran Tarkenton and had an opportunity to interview him, and his excellent business skills and his effectiveness in the business arena. As a matter of fact, Fran Tarkenton had a TV show back in the day called That's Incredible, which kind of sort of talked about like paranoia type events, kind of like a Ripley's Believe It or Not type deal. So big shout out to the Georgia Bulldogs today and their legend Fran Tarkenton, who was quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs, spent off and on 18 years at the Minnesota Vikings, but in his latter career is a very, very huge, successful individual in the business world, played quarterback at Georgia, one of the better ones in Georgia history. Hope you guys like this video that I'm about to do on Jake Fromm. For the Georgia fans, this is not coming from me, and this is in quotations, go Dogs and hunker down. A lot of us, especially if we follow SEC football, remember September 9th, 2017, when Georgia was headed up to South Bend, Indiana to take on iconic Notre Dame. The only thing about it is Georgia had a quarterback in Jacob Eason who was injured in the Appalachian State game. So guess what? You're talking about taking a true freshman quarterback who, yes, has had a great career down in Warner Robins, Georgia, came into Georgia as a 5-star recruit in Jake Fromm. But I want to say that this was the victory for the Georgia Bulldogs that really, really got this program headed towards dynasty status. And it wasn't so much the win itself, it was the heroic way in which they won the game. Now, if they would have won the game, say 3 touchdowns or something like that, it wouldn't have meant as much. But for the heroics, especially the Godwin catch in the corner of the end zone, it really set the tone for Georgia football as we know it now. As a matter of fact, when I was doing podcasts on Facebook and analyzing the season, I had this thing where I mainly focused on Alabama, Georgia, and Auburn, who I felt at the time were the SEC's big 3. And coming into this particular football game, even before the injury of Jacob Eason, I thought, well, this is the game that is going to determine kind of sort of the trajectory of where this season may go. And looking at the ball game, arguably one of the most exciting games that I had seen the whole season. Jake Fromm basically playing somewhat of the game manager, I guess you could say, but still not having a bad ball game. I mean, he managed, as a true freshman, managed to get Georgia a win in South Bend as a true freshman. So this leads me to my point of this particular podcast when you talk about Jake Fromm. I think Jake Fromm probably, just listening off and on to the, Georgia fan bases and different Georgia podcasts about Jake Fromm. You have some folks that really like Jake Fromm. But then you have that other subculture of Georgia fans that only view Jake Fromm as a game manager. And this is my opinion of what I see in Jake Fromm. One, I think a lot of the disdain, well, not disdain, I think Georgia fans absolutely love Jake Fromm. How can you not, love a guy who, as a true freshman, took Georgia on one of the most improbable runs late season that you can imagine. I mean, having the come back from behind after being all but count out against Oklahoma, and then coming within seconds of beating Alabama, who had a very good football team that season. So when we talk about Jake Fromm, what's the big deal? Like, why can't Georgia or just college football in general appreciate a guy like Jake Fromm? You know, taking him beyond the game manager status. If you look at some of Jake Fromm's throws and ball placements, now this is just maybe not for the typical casual fan to see this, but when you see the precision in which he throws the football, the decisions that he makes, especially in reading coverages, I think you'll take away that game manager perception of Jake Fromm. When you look at how he throws the back shoulder throw, you know, I think you start to think, okay, this is a very, very good quarterback. Very good quarterback. The only issue, I think is more so what we have come to believe what a great quarterback in college football looks like. And what we're starting to have a lot of endearment for in the college football game is the dual threat quarterback. We want a quarterback that can do everything. We want a quarterback that's spectacular, like Johnny Manziel, like Cam Newton, like Nick Marshall, like Kyler Murray, like Tua Tagovailoa. We want that kind of Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is about to have a monster season at Oklahoma. That's possibly a whole nother video. But either way, what we want we don't want the boredom of the NFL. And that's kind of what you see out of Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm has a very Tom Brady-ish approach to the game, but it's highly effective. You know, it's just not flashy enough for the Georgia fans or for the SEC to consider him up there with Tua Tagovailoa, or say when Jalen Hurts was there, Jalen Hurts, or maybe even now Joe Burrows. All right, I want you guys to look out in LSU for Joe Burrows. I really am impressed with most of what I see out of Joe Burrows. So I think where the discrepancy lies with Jake Fromm is that he's just not flashy enough. He's just not, he's not a dual threat quarterback. If he's not a dual threat quarterback, he's just not good enough to be considered among the elite when you talk about quarterbacks in this present day in time. In the NFL, I think he's going to be a very serviceable quarterback. I think he's going to be great in the NFL. But college football is starting to get in the process of not, appreciating a quarterback like Jake Fromm. You talk about Jake Fromm's stats over the last few years. You talk about 64% completion percentage, 5,376 yards per attempt, 9 yards per attempt. So what we need Jake Fromm to do is get that up a little bit, probably get that yards per attempt around like 15 or 20, so we can get him about 3,000 yards so y'all can get off his back. We also need him to maybe run the ball a little bit more. I mean, 1 year, negative 37 yards, that kind of thing. It's just, Jake Fromm is not the exciting guy that we are accustomed to. You talk about 96 attempts running the ball for 52 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, nowhere near being close to a dual threat quarterback. But Jake Fromm has led Georgia to one of the best runs that Georgia has had, at least in recent history. 2 consecutive SEC championships. Should have actually won both. In my opinion, they were pretty much dragging Alabama all over the football field, only to surrender that game late. Pulled away from Auburn in 2017, and what was kind of a stalemate. And in that game, 2017, I was just waiting for it. I was waiting for which team was going to make the mistake first, because it was going back and forth. As a matter of fact, Auburn missed some opportunities in the red zone with a Jarrett Stidham fumble. Of course, that's something that Jarrett Stidham was really good at in the red zone, fumbling, causing turnovers. No shot at Jarrett Stidham, War Eagle, but, I mean, that's the reality of it. But then you look at the fact that Jake Fromm led Georgia as a quarterback after getting thrashed in Auburn a few weeks back, reeling his team back in to make a very improbable run through the college football playoffs, literally in overtime, staring at the first national championship for Georgia since 1980. Come on, guys. I think y'all need to hunker down over in Georgia and really show some love to Jake Fromm because he's an excellent quarterback. I think he will have an excellent year. Maybe if he runs the ball a little bit more, might be a viable Heisman candidate. Look forward to seeing what Georgia's going to do opening up the season against SEC opponent Vanderbilt. SEC on the road, baby. So Georgia gets ready out of the gate. No cupcakes to begin the season this year. A couple of weeks later, we'll welcome Notre Dame. Big shout out to the Georgia Bulldogs. Once again, it's K2 to go for Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. We talk about Auburn football and the rest of the SEC. Talking about Georgia here early on a Saturday morning. Talking about Jake Fromm. Let's show Jake Fromm some love, baby. Fearless and True Gang and all the other SEC fanatics, let's get this comment section active. Subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. War Eagle.